Do you avoid books? What are your reasons? I sometimes avoid books too, and I'm going to talk about my reasons today. Hey there, guys. From time to time, I find myself avoiding picking up certain books. And I got to thinking it would be interesting to have a discussion on why we do that. Why, as readers, do we pick certain books and avoid other books? Make sure that you like the video, subscribe to my channel, all that good stuff. Join my Discord if you want to have more in-depth discussions about different things that are book related or related to my videos. That would be awesome if you would do that. If you do want to support me on Patreon, that's awesome too. My link is in the description below. And here we go. The first reason is pretty much a given. Bad reviews. We get on the internet and we look at a blog post or watch a booktube video, or we see something posted on Facebook about some book that somebody thought was just absolutely awful, and we decide, okay, well, I'm just not going to bother reading that book. Even though it may be a book that we might end up liking if we give it a shot, oftentimes those bad reviews tend to put a bad taste in our mouth, and we just don't want to bother doing it. You know, we've got so many books to read, so little time, as goes the adage, and so why waste our time with mediocre books or bad books? There's pros and cons, right? Because I've reviewed some books that I really did not like, but I know a lot of people who love those exact same books. And that's kind of why when I do my reviews, I try to be objective about it and say, hey, you know, I didn't really care for this, but you might like it. And that's okay. Everybody's different. But bad reviews tend to be the number one reason why we don't pick up a certain book. And I'm guilty of that myself. I watch a lot of reviews. Not only am I a booktuber, I watch other booktubers, and I appreciate all the effort that's put into the videos and the time taken out to give a review. And a lot of times I'll see stuff and I'll be like, you know, I don't think I'm going to bother. Especially when it's very heavily weighted in favor of bad reviews, or maybe it's 50-50. I just won't bother picking up that book. One in particular that I can think of is Red Rising. Red Rising gets a lot of mixed reviews, and I see so many people who really, really love it, especially people that I respect, and yet I've seen other reviews where there were people that just didn't really like it, and they tend to have the same tastes as I do, so I may just have to pick up Red Rising at some point and give it a shot. It can't hurt, but I hesitate because of those bad reviews. Also, and this isn't as common, but the next one is good reviews. If a book is way overhyped on blogs or booktube videos or Facebook posts or things like that, and it just seems to be that everybody and their brother loves this book, I know for me sometimes I'll hesitate to even bother picking it up because, you know, what if I really don't like it, and what if all these reviews are skewed, things like that. And I have read some books that were really overhyped on BookTube, and then I ended up just really not liking that particular book. So I've been burned by that. So it does make me hesitant when there's just everybody clamoring for the book and saying how wonderful it is. I start to wonder, okay, is it really that good? Is this too good to be true? I struggle with that, but ultimately I still pick up a lot of those books and give them a shot, and a lot of them I do end up liking. So, but that may be a reason for you as well to hesitate picking up a certain book. Another big reason that people avoid picking up certain books is the length. You know, you'll see people pick up these big chunkers. They're like 1,000 to 1,200 pages, and it's just this massive tome that you could seriously hurt somebody with. And and it's honestly really overwhelming. Like oftentimes I get the feeling when I see books like that, I kind of cringe inside because it's like, oh my gosh, I can't think about reading such a large book. And I have read those large books. I've read the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy as one whole book, and it's easily 1,000 or pages or more. And I read the Stormlight Archive books, and they're just these massive tomes. While they're really, really good, they can be kind of daunting. For the longest time, I did not pick up The Stand by Stephen King because of how flippin' long it is. And I've read other Stephen King books that were just as long, and they really dragged on and kind of wore me out, and so I was really hesitant to pick up The Stand. But I finally did, and I'm reading it on audiobook. So I figured that's a good way to get through a big chunker, especially for an author that tends to write very heavily detailed. I figured audiobooks are a good way to cash in on that. But it's daunting for people to pick up these massive books, and I figure the sweet spot is right around 400 to 600 pages. That's a good length for a book, at least in my opinion. Anything beyond that, I tend to be like, whew, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be for me or not, but that's a reason that I sometimes avoid books, and maybe that's a reason for you as well. And another reason that I sometimes avoid books, I don't know if you're the same, you probably are maybe, is reading level. Sometimes you hear that a book has a really, really heavy use of either flowery language or archaic language. You're just kind of hesitant because you don't want to have the dictionary right next to you and looking up every other word. And the Kindles are helpful for that because at least you have a dictionary right on the Kindle, right? So at least for those books you can pick it up on the Kindle. But an example of this is the Silmarillion. Like when I first started reading the Silmarillion, I was totally overwhelmed. If the reading level of Lord of the Rings is here, the reading level for the Silmarillion is up here. It's that drastic, and it's a lot of genealogies of different family lines and things like that. And it kind of reads like a book of the Old Testament in the Bible, and it's just like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And I finally got through it, and I really enjoyed the Silmarillion. But even now, if I think about rereading the Silmarillion, I'm like, oh my god, I don't know if I want to do that. It takes so much time and so much like mental effort to read a book like that. So, if you're not used to reading heavily flowery language and archaic English on a daily basis, it can be really hard to handle. So that's another one. Reading level is a big reason why people avoid books. And I'm one of those people that hesitates to go that route. Another reason is content in the book. And this might be a lot of really dark, heavy themes. It could be sexual content. If you don't like books that have a lot of heavy sexual content, you might decide to avoid a book. A Song of Ice and Fire is always noted for having a lot of sexual content. The Darkness That Comes Before by R. Scott Baker is another one that's always advertised to have a lot of heavy content in it, whether it be sexual trauma or the most detestable, vile acts that any human being could ever commit can be found in R. Scott Baker's works, and a lot of the themes are very heavy and weighted down and can be very depressing. And so, books that have those kinds of things in them tend to be books that people avoid. And you may end up missing out on a great book, but some of that content isn't for everybody. Especially people who have experienced a lot of those things in their personal life and tend to be triggered by stuff like that. It's probably best to avoid those kinds of books, right? But I mean, I very much enjoy A Song of Ice and Fire, but I understand why a lot of people don't even bother reading it at all, just because there is a lot of graphic content in it, a lot of violence. It's called grimdark for a reason, and same with the Prince of Nothing series by R. Scott Baker. So I'm really looking forward at some point to trying R. Scott Baker, but I understand why there are content warnings out there and trigger warnings out there so that people can be warned if that's something that they can't handle, they may want to avoid those books. And so I have a great respect for people who understand their limits and don't want to go there. I haven't avoided a book because of that yet, but I have avoided movies in the past. Like to this day, I still will not watch the Saw movies. I don't like extreme body horror. But anyway, that's a side note. That's not book related. But I just threw that out there as an example. And then the final reason that I want to talk about today is the length of a series. If you're looking at a series to read and there are 15 or more books in a series, that can be really off-putting sometimes, especially if those books are big chunkers. For instance, The Wheel of Time. A lot of people feel like 15 books, especially as long as some of those books are, is just too much. I personally shelved the Wheel of Time series for now. I may or may not ever come back to it. I just don't know. I haven't made a final decision on that yet, but for right now, it's just not something that I want to undertake. It's just a bit too much for me to take on, to put that much of an investment into that series. The Malazan Book of the Fallen is another one. Now, the initial series is only 10 books, but then you've got the other novels of the Malazan Empire by N.C. Esselmont. That's another, oh gosh, I don't know, probably another 10 books there. And then, so there's this whole series. And, people will say that you don't have to read beyond the initial 10 book series. So that's fine. And I really feel like I do want to continue that series at some point. But it is extremely challenging to think about getting into a series that is that long. One exception, I think, and I know a lot of people feel the same way, is the Dresden Files. Even though it's like 18 books so far, they're short. They're pulpy reads. They're easy to get through. So that would be one exception to this rule. Even the Dresden Files, a lot of people just avoid because there's so many books and it will never be over. The Discworld is another one. The Shannara books are another series. I could go on and on about these very long series that just overwhelm people and make them feel like they don't really want to get into that and make that kind of a time investment. So I get it. You may have other reasons for avoiding books. I would love to hear those in the comments below. Remember, as I said at the beginning, check out my Discord. We can talk about this topic there or other topics or individual book series that you want to talk about. You can probably find on my Discord. I would love to have you join. We've got a great group of people there. And that's really all I've got for you today, guys. Please make sure to read more books. I'll talk to you soon.